All right, hey, welcome. This is the overview of Lightroom. This is part two. If you didn't watch part one, it was a riveting overview of just basically kind of how Lightroom is set up and different ways you can look at your photos when you basically put them in. I didn't go over, though, how to actually put in photos and then what to do with your photos once you've put them in there. So we're going to dive into that today. So in this part two, we're going to add some photos. So I'm going to make a new album just so it's clean. And this is going to just be called example like last time. I'm not going to include the selected photo. I'm going to say create. And now I'm going to go to example, and it's empty. This is likely what yours is going to look like more when you start your project. So if I go up to add photos, I can click here and then I can browse, or I could like use the connected device, but I'm just going to browse and I'm going to go. We have a big shared drive, and these are some photos I took of a varsity soccer thing. Now, one thing I do a lot is actually just pull it right from maybe an SD card that's connected. And that's really nice because you can basically just pull in your pictures. And if you're connected to the cloud and you have a fast enough connection, it will pull the full file in there and you don't have to worry about taking up a whole bunch of room on your computer. So that's really nice when you just want to move files between and you don't want to do like an extra step of adding those files to your desktop or to a drive. However, as I tell my students, it's never a bad thing to move your files first to a desktop or drive because you can actually have a good backup that way, just in case for whatever reason Lightroom loses your photos. I've never had it happen, but I never trust technology completely. So I always have a backup. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to this soccer game I shot. I'm going to grab, and these are all edited, but I'm just going to grab, let's say, these ones here. I'm going to say, those are the photos. Now it'll take you to this screen. From this screen, you can either select or deselect photos. Usually by default, it's selected. The one thing you'll notice here, if you ever try to re-import photos and you notice it's grayed out, that's because the computer recognizes the file name and it doesn't want to add duplicates of that same file. So we're going to click these. We're going to add 8 photos. Now, the cool thing about Lightroom that if you're coming from like Photoshop or something like that, the thing about Lightroom that's super nice is you're not doing destructive work on the original photos. So once you've exported them, then you have new files that have their own characteristics that you work with the editing. But when you're actually working in Lightroom, you're not destroying the original photo. That's really helpful because sometimes we make mistakes. And if you've worked in Photoshop and you accidentally save over an original file, especially kind of back in the day when we were editing photos, it's really painful then to not be able to kind of go fix that or have a lot of workarounds to get that fixed. I used to always teach my students to like duplicate their photos to have those originals, but now we don't have to worry about that, which is great, especially with Lightroom. So here's a picture. So I can double click it and I can see that picture. And you'll notice because I made example as a folder, I can now see that there's 8 photos in that folder. I can always click to other folders and go back to example, and here it is right here. I can again go through my different areas to check out this photo, but I'm going to stay here. And now I have this photo that I can work with. So let's explore these buttons over on the right. So this is your share or export button. So when you're all ready, you can click this and you can go through your exports. We'll worry about that at the end. But for now, what you can do is you can go through all of these sliders. Mine by default, and I think this is a Lightroom default, defaults to editing based on your light, your color, all those kind of edits. It's your edit panel over here. You can always click that and it'll go away. Again, also, if I don't want to keep seeing this, I can also click this and that'll go away. So over here, I do want to generally start with my edit button and go through some edits. Some people, however, import LUTs or presets, excuse me, in Lightroom. LUTs are in Premiere Pro. Anyway, but you can you can import presets. You can buy people's presets. A lot of photographers will sell them. If you ever watch YouTube videos, you can find their stuff, and they make really cool presets. However, Adobe Lightroom also provides some. So I have my presets here, and a preset just is presettings. In case you're like, what is a preset? It's just a presetting. So I could go through and look at all these and say like, oh, is that an interesting look that I might want to go for? And all of these are named to different things because I might want to do different things with them. This one might give it kind of like a fall vibe if I want that, like it's a more of a golden hour versus This one I always joke with the students about. This is my like super gritty one. This one works well with media shoots. It's called my superhero soccer Faulkner money money money. Superhero soccer here, swimming, etc. Okay, those are all my user ones. Those are ones that I've created. I can actually close this down, and then I can also look at ones that I've saved from the community. So these are different ones that I've seen and said like, oh, those are cool. I want those. And then just some basic ones. So like color, I want a natural or bright, high contrast, blah, blah, blah. Down here you have like black and white. This is always really good if they're just like basics and I just want some simple black and whites or whatever. So these are all great. Just kind of like basic ones. They're yours. The ones that are kind of fun early on is just to click on recommended and see like what do they think you should do. And sometimes they're terrible, but every now and then you'll find one and you'll be like, that's kind of cool. Like so let's say I like this one, which I don't. But let's say I like this one. It's kind of bright. It's kind of interesting. I can click it and say apply this, and then I can change the amount I want to apply. So I could increase that or decrease that. I almost said up and down it, which is not a thing. All right, then I can also save this to my presets or save as a version. And this is from this person. I could follow them, do that kind of social side of it, which again, I never do that. But I do save a lot of people's presets because they're really cool. All right, then I can also, and this is a really neat thing, I can say more like this if I like that version. And then I can kind of go through and see these different versions of that as well. But as you can see, it just kind of gets you going. And if you're like, okay, this is interesting, but what is it actually doing? If you click on your edits, you can actually see how the sliders change. And so sometimes this can teach you a little bit too. You can be like, oh, that's interesting. If I change the sliders in a certain way, that's the result I'm going to get. Or if I click on that and say, I want this one, I could go in here and I could fine tune it, right? I could say I want less clarity, but I want more dehaze. Sharpening is 100%, like it's all the way up. And I want like maybe my temperature, I want it cold, that, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, you get the point though. I can actually adjust this preset before I put it away. If I want it, then I could create a preset by it, or as we just learned, right, I could save to those presets. But once I've made any edits, if I want to keep it the kind of unique way it is, then I want to click this plus, and then I can name it something, and I could say like, I don't know, fall gritty, grit, maybe not gritty, because I think of Philadelphia Flyers. Anyway, so I can save that in there, and now if I go back to yours and say saved from community, none of those are in there, but it is fall grit right here, because I think probably because I changed those edits, I didn't change them within the community. Now, if you're a part of the premium, you can also get all of these things. And these are really interesting because they will actually try to adapt to certain things. And so if, for instance, you want to just edit the subject, it will basically walk through masking the subject and try to give them a pop, which is cool because it's just trying to like save you the steps of going through a mask and doing all that stuff. Those adaptive presets, are really helpful, and you can use those frequently. Again, if we want to go fall, we can do all these kind of fall things. It just tries to make it that nice kind of golden look. All right, I'm going to close the presets, but that's the presets over there. Once you click on it, it will go away. And then I just have this edit still open because I didn't close it. Now I still have all these edits on here. I'm probably not going to talk through every single one of these, but the primary ones I use are, right now I'm in a profile. So again, I can still change that amount because I'm still editing that profile. I'm going to put it right there. And then in here, my exposure is how bright or dark it is based on shutter speed, aperture, and ISO working together. My contrast is just how contrasty it is. What are the lights and darks looking like here? I'm going to get off that just so I can undo. There we go. My highlights are just going to find those highlight areas. I use highlights a lot because sometimes when you get those blowouts, you can kind of mute them a little bit. So I tend to like to use highlights. Shadows I use less, but if you want to get some of those details in the shadows, that is helpful. Blacks, you are just making brighter or darker. We could leave ours right there. And then the curve, if you are someone who uses curves, this is a very convenient place to have it. All you have to do is click on here and you can adjust your curves as appropriate as you like. I'm going to leave that alone for now. Down here, color temperature. This is great if you're especially in a studio setting and you need to adjust the color temperature. You can also use the selection dropper to change the color temperature. So if you have a gray card and you want to use that in your shot, this color dropper is super helpful. Tint, vibrance, and saturation all affect the color in your picture. Now, if you really want to get involved, and I clicked away too soon, you can do your color mixer and then choose the specific color you want to edit, and then you can adjust the hue, the saturation, and the luminance. If you're curious about the difference between hue, saturation, and luminance, I'll have a video later, but a lot of people have good videos on how to use these color mixer sliders. Similarly, you can do point color, so you can select a color in the photo. So if I grab this, yep, if I select, you would. Okay, anyway, let's go to orange, I guess. Let's collect that, and then I can adjust that color and see, notice it's just the ball and like the laces. It's kind of the same as color mixer in the sense that you're adjusting a color. It just lets you kind of like absolutely identify a color, so you're not guessing as much. Okay. Here under effects, this is what I go to all the time. Texture is going to give you that grainier look, a textured look. Clarity, you can sharpen things, but it's going to sometimes blow it out. You can also make it really like hazy, and it looks like ethereal. So that's the other way. Dehaze is great, especially if there's any haze in the photo. It's hard to describe haze, but if it kind of has that like foggy look, sometimes you can just clean that up a little bit with haze or dehaze. And then vignette, people do this. I do this sometimes just to get the focus there, to get it a little bit tighter. You can go the opposite way and get white, which is nice if you're doing studio shoots with white and your edges have some issues. You can use a vignette and kind of clean that up. It's a nice little cheat. And then grain, you can just make it really grainy or not. Sharpening, I think, is self-explanatory, but sharpening is to sharpen. One thing that I'll explain in a later one is how to denoise and using the AI to denoise. It is amazing. So I will talk about that later. And then optics, one thing for optics that a lot of people overlook and they don't realize is this enable lens corrections. If you have a RAW file and it has the data for the lens, you can click this and it will actually identify the lens, or you can manually do it, and it will adjust if there's any kind of lens correction that Lightroom knows about. Very helpful. Lens blur, last thing, you can apply, you can like give it a lens blur as it's showing there in this example. And it kind of creates that hokey bokeh is what I'd call it. That's, I think, Apple phones are kind of famous for forcing us into. All right, going down from edit, we have crop. Crop allows exactly what you think. You can pull these sliders, you can crop it. What I really like about crop is you can actually go into this and choose the sizing. So if you're doing something for Instagram or social media, 1:1 is always great. If you're doing a reel, you might do 16:9. So all those things are super helpful. Also just like straightening it really quickly. You can kind of go through and make sure it's how you want it to look there. Crop overlay, you can do thirds, you can do fifths, diagonals. So just depending on what you want, golden spiral, golden ratio, really cool stuff that they offer for free easily. Obviously rotate and flip, I think that's self-explanatory, but do. And then geometry, I've used this actually a decent amount every now and then for landscape. So if I'm ever doing architecture or landscape, transform can help because it can just adjust things a little bit how you want. If you click transform, you get all these kind of distortion adjustments. Vertical, horizontal, rotate, aspect, scale, X, Y offsets, things like that. All right, that is the crop tool. Down to remove. So we can remove things in Lightroom. It works pretty well. The generative AI The generative AI works pretty well. So let's see just like how it does. I've never tried this photo before for this. So let's just see. We have a person back there. If I don't want the person, let's apply. Let's see how it does. This can be hit or miss. My recommendation for this, if you've never used it before, is add a lot of what's around it. So this actually did a pretty good job. That's pretty great. There's a little bit of an edge. And if you're someone who's really wanting precision, use Photoshop for this feature. Don't use Lightroom unless it's something really small, like a little zit or something. But I've frequently seen the little edge there, and that edge can be annoying because, oh, he's a ghost. Because that edge just, I can see it here, and I think it might ruin the photo. So something you have to play with. Some other things you can do though, you can heal. So that was weird that it added that person in there. But if I do this, it will try to heal it there. That looks awful. Let's undo. I want to get rid of that guy in the middle. That's just weird. Okay. I have a stamp or a clone tool here. This is something that Photoshop has that again is trying to let you get rid of things. And then I can fix red eye really quickly here. So that is the kind of remove tool. And then the mask tool is amazing in Lightroom. I really like it. I think it's actually better than Photoshop. The one you can always do just like person. This is cool. It'll try to identify people right away. But notice on number 10 here, there's not a perfect selection of his jersey. Here, this one's pretty good, like because there's a lot of contrast. And then if I click this one and I say entire person, I can also say just the face, the body skin, the hair, or the clothes. What's nice about that is then I can adjust just those areas. I'll say entire person for now, and then it creates a mask up here. If you're unfamiliar with masks, they just let you basically edit one area. This will look like something you've seen before, but when you start editing, it's only editing that one area, which is nice, as long as you're on the mask. You can add many masks, and masks can be a little bit frustrating if you're first new to them, but they're amazing if you want to do some just like focused edits. They work quite well. So I'm going to go off of that mask for now, and I'm actually going to go to a new mask here. Let's see, where did I go? New mask. Okay, so sorry. On this new mask, if I push plus, I can do another one. Another cool one that is, I think, under kind of like utilized is I can use this object selection tool, and then I can basically just brush over it. And remember how his jersey didn't work the first time? This time I'm just going to make sure the jersey is covered, but not that background. And then I just color like you did in 3rd grade, let go. And then there we go. That's a much better selection of this individual. So that brush one works really well. If you notice initially, the first selection didn't work well. I could also do, I use this a lot in studio shots if the light didn't fire well from the bottom, but a linear gradient, all you do is left click and drag. And let's say I want this top to be brighter for some reason. I can add that and then increase. And notice I can get a brighter background there. The sun, it's coming in. Okay, so I can do anything like that. That's a linear gradient. I think you understand then a radial gradient is just a circle of light that you could add, or darkness, whatever your interest might be. And then again, I can add color ranges, things like that. So I can choose a color range and do something within that color range. So if I click that red, I can brighten up the color range within that red that it's trying to find. Lastly, I have luminance range, which is a little bit more complex. Also, I have these default ones like sky background if I want to select those. All right. Last thing, and this is amazing, is I have versions. So if you do a bunch of editing and you're like, gosh, I just messed everything up, you can always go back to your original. So this is the original one I saw. This is the one now. This is the original, this now. So I could always go back to this, and then I love how that guy comes back in the background. And I can get back to my original. There are other buttons here. I'll show those in the future. But that's a long overview of all the stuff you can do in Lightroom with those different buttons. In the next one, I'm going to just walk through like editing a little bit and some things that I always do in editing and things that might help you while you do those in editing. Thanks for watching. Check out the next one right after this.